A relationship is the way in which two or more people are connected, and separation is the action of being moved apart. I had looked at the individuals in my family, and I tried to find the connection, but only found disconnection. My grandfather, the exiled politician, Count Pietersen. My father, the preacher, Pietersen. And me, Pietersen, 28-year-old filmmaker. This is our story. My grandfather sacrificed his family for this thing called freedom, but I just don't get it. Is there anything more important than family, than your children? I recognized that there was a strong pattern of absent fathers in my family, and that we had never asked how it affected us who were left behind, and the ones who left. There's my grandfather who lives in Sweden, my father in Midrand, Johannesburg, and me, moving around from flat to flat, all of us living such separate lives. And with my brothers having recently had their first children, it was suddenly important to understand the legacy and the lessons that we as fathers should leave for the next generation. I'm a filmmaker, and I'm making a film about 3 generations of men in my family and the impact of their presence and absence. What initially interested me in this story was my grandfather Count, the unrecognized apartheid struggle hero who fought for freedom, but post-apartheid still stays in Sweden, away from the country he fought for. I had found a front cover article about my grandfather on the cover of the Sunday Times on May 29, 1960. It says here, Pietersen, who 4 weeks ago disappeared when police were seeking to detain him under the emergency regulations, said Colonel Nasser has been given the full true picture of events in South Africa. Pietersen said there can be no rest in South Africa until the just demands of Pan-African nationalists are met. That is the acceptance of a government by the Africans. I had come to the house where we once all stayed as a family. Now my dad lives alone here, in the memories of what once was our young family.
Good for the stomach, Nate, as well. Not 15. I'm doing not too good today. That's not too good. Okay, let's zero it again.
I started doing the documentary because of Granddad. And then I realized that his absence probably affected the family more than we have cared to admit. And yet there's so much family happening. Pietersen said, many of us who have now escaped mass arrests will now man the freedom passes throughout the world. He stated in detail how he and his colleagues intend to expose South Africa to the world and demanded that South Africa should accept the rule of an African majority.
It was an unusual name, Count Percy Pietersen. So one can never forget that. But then what I do, of course, remember that he was a member of the Youth League and the ANC itself.
The past. Only in South Africa is the failure to carry it every minute of the day a crime. And a crime only for the Africans.
I have found this video produced in the 1960s of my granddad, and he's actually acting in the film. My granddad's last experiences in South Africa is being hunted down by the apartheid police and acting in an anti-apartheid documentary, while at the same time he had just become a father. So what are your earliest memories as a child and with your parents?
Yes, yeah. Early memories are really with my grandmother, because my dad wasn't around then. From what I got to know later on, that when I was born on that day, he wasn't around, but then he came around, I think the following day, and he came just to talk to me, to say, Nkululeko, look, Nkululeko means freedom, by the way. Look, I've got to leave the country, but it's going to be in the interest of everybody. That's what he was, apparently was talking to me. No memories of that. But, he said, look, I'm going, and I'm going because we're fighting a struggle here for our country, and I hope that by leaving, that South Africa will be better for you and for your children and for your grandchildren. So that's what I was told. And that really touched me when my mom first told me that. I think I was about 12 years or so when she told me about that.
Like his dad, me and my brother grew up with my grandmother in Lesotho, and my parents raised my younger siblings in Johannesburg. When I was young, I felt a sense of longing and frustration at being left behind. I had never thought it was a loss that I did not have a relationship with my father. Never. But suddenly it did matter. It mattered so much that I called my mother in New York crying. Why didn't my dad love me? Was there something wrong with me? I am going to Sweden to understand how my grandfather's sacrifices continue to affect our family till today. Wanted to come in the winter, but we didn't know it's this cold.
You didn't know it's this cold?
Well, like we didn't. I guess I did, but when you're here, the reality hits you.
Oh yeah, the reality. Yeah, that's true. You see, and it's not yet cold. People must have been telling you that
it's a warm winter.
Yeah, it's a warm winter. It's not yet cold. Just imagine what it is like when it's really cold.
Yeah.
I was in tears. I looked back. I said, oh my God, am I leaving the mother continent? I usually tell people in course on it, hey, that day, kwamanza mehlo, ndazifulathela iintaba zase-Afrika, ndanika umva imilambo yakowethu, you see. Kwamanza mehlo, tears came down. When the plane was flying, passing Kilimanjaro, you see, and the announcement were passing, I said, no, I'm leaving the mother continent. I had no plans a couple of weeks ago that I would leave the mother continent, but I said, Mother Africa, I'll be back soon. But it took longer than I had planned.
After my granddad was exiled from South Africa in 1960, my father would grow up with his grandmother in Alexandra Township.
I remember one day when I was playing this game, and I don't know if I was imagining or something, and I saw my mom there, and it's like she was saying, count, count, my dad's name is Count. I thought I was imagining that, and there were lots of people there, and I ran out, I said, and Mami say count, I was always speak Afrikaans at times, and she said, no, and I ran back, said, what was that all about?
I tried to persuade them. I said, look, I've just got married. I'm an 8-year-old man's son. And they say, for that reason, you should leave. You don't want to see your son grow up in an apartheid country and receiving Bantu education.
I'm going to meet my grandmother Brigitte Falk, with whom my grandfather had established a family in Sweden.
He visited me in Malmö and I visited him in Copenhagen. And at that time he lived in a very rich suburb of Copenhagen. Then Count moved over to my place. We had Domsa and Hinsa and we lived together in Malmö and outside Malmö. He has something from Count that I have noticed.
What is that?
His fingers.
Oh.
Count has a little thick fingers.
Yes,
And he has the same. Yes. Experiences from the 5-6 first years affect us all our life. Because we are the most receptive these 6 first years, 5-6 first years. They are important.
My little nephew learns how to be as a boy and eventually a man from his father, something I never had growing up. My grandfather's daughter, Nomsa, spoke about how she admires her father.
I have big respect for his achievement and I admire him and his ideals and that is, everything he has done. And giving up and sacrificing so much for his political struggle. Because he has sacrificed career, money, family.
I have been involved in our struggle for national liberation and self-determination for over 60 years. It started in East London when I was still a teenager. I was dragged into joining a march against the past laws.
When you engage in certain activities like we were, we knew what the consequences would be. We knew that if we get caught, we'll be hanged. We can be hanged. As a number of our people got hanged, they get tortured to death. So you are doing this thing consciously. And even in our trial, the first day when we saw our lawyers, they also said, prepare for the worst, you're going to die. So until the last day, the expectation was death.
In Sweden, we have always had enormous support. The main parties, the Social Democrats, the Communist Party, and even the liberal parties, they have always given the liberation movements lots and lots of support, you see. So, and I used to go to the churches here in Sweden at Christmas time, you see, and ask them to send Christmas cards to people on Robben Island. I made to understand many of them never got them, you see, so on these Christmas cards.
Whereas my grandfather Count had dedicated his life to politics, my father had found belonging in the church.
I became very spiritual as well, given my grandmother's, who was very spiritual. So I spent a lot of time in prayer. I remember lighting a candle and wanting to move from 4th Avenue to 12th Avenue just to pray in the middle of the night. And fortunately, my grandmother saw me and stopped me. So it was quite funny, actually.
On a Saturday afternoon, you might find him here, campaigning in Noordwijk, a smaller town of Midrand, Johannesburg.
How are you, sir? Sorry, meneer. Sorry, sir. We'd like you to pray for peace in Jerusalem.
When we finally joined my parents, I was 10 years old, and I grew up with my father being involved in the church and youth upliftment programs. I remember being jealous of the other children who were getting his attention, because I was not.
Pray for peace in the Middle East and the whole world, please. Because that's where peace begins, in the Middle East. Christ came that we might have peace.
The Social Democratic Party here in Lund honored me by making me a councillor. I was a councillor from 2006 to 2010. And I also sat on the education committee of the City Council of Lund, representing the Social Democratic Party of Lund. One sits here, and then when the speaker or who sits next to the mayor calls upon you to make a statement, you go down there and make a statement. One gets up from here, when the speaker calls upon your name and asks you to come and address the council, then one goes here, down this way, the way I'm going, and ultimately ends up here where the normally, where this is where, when you, it's usually pushed out. So every member stands here, reads his statement, or just addresses the council, or answer questions, and so on.
I was interested to see how my grandfather was balancing the family with his political career.
Yeah, a very loving father, and he was very fun to play with. He was, really, really good in playing. There's a Swedish children's song called "The Bear is Asleep," where someone is a bear and they go down and they pretend to sleep, and then you go around in a circle around this bear, and And suddenly, it wakes up and, it scares you and so on. And he was so good doing this plays and so on, and, scaring and so on. And I had a lot of fun with my dad, actually. I had a lot of fun with him.
Yes, yeah. He bought me some nice presents, but there was this particular present which was very impressive because of its size. And being in Alexandra, kids, most kids didn't get that kind of presents from their parents. It was a toy train, and you had to connect it. It was made up of pieces. You had to connect it, and when you connected it, it made like a tower. It was a winding tower, and it was battery operated and remote control, and it had stations as well, and you could, then it make sounds, whee, whee.
This is Marcus, Brigitte's son from her first marriage, and who my grandfather helped raise.
Full of surprises. Like we lived in Malmö and I was about 7, 8. And he said we should go down to the city. And then I think we took a cab. And suddenly we was at the airport. And we took the plane to Copenhagen and went to see a movie. And that's so typical. I mean, from nothing, and then you are in Copenhagen watching a Tarzan. Tarzan.
You still remember the movie?
Oh, yes.
Namsan?
Was it Namsan?
Mm-hmm.
I was just sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, here you see your father visiting us.
We have to come here now.
Yeah.
Granddad Count had organized a trip for his firstborn son to come and see him in Sweden. This was a very emotional reunion for both father and son, as the last time he had seen him, he'd only been 8 months old.
I wanted to stay. I can remember that very clearly. I wanted to stay, but I never discussed it with him because I wanted him to say, "Son, I want you to stay. I want to send you to this fantastic school, so you get the best education and so on, and then we can be father and son and have a great time." But I was disappointed about that.
There was always work to do, you see. We had offices all over the world and so on, in most African countries, in Europe and North America. So you always had to provide information for people, and there were the many solidarity groups in different countries. Almost every week I had an invitation to some university.
Even when I met him, it was joyous, it was a great occasion, and it was wonderful to connect with him, but we never really connected at an emotional level to the extent that we should have really, but we didn't, I suppose. Always that emotional war, really.
In my relationship with my dad and his relationship with his dad, there are parallels all over. And it's been the biggest surprise for me because I didn't know that my dad actually has that conscious understanding of the emotional absence of his father.
are guilt feelings with all of these involved. Guilt feelings about not being able to take care of, but there are also guilt feelings why the father left them. Am I not good enough because my father isn't taking care of me? I don't think that he has felt that he had a choice. I don't think so. But because, you know, when you have your friends in Robben Island and, you know, and you can't go back to your country and you yeah, then you don't, I don't think you feel that you have a choice. Then you just work, you know, to get change.
We told Britain, France, and the United States and say, look, you watered down our resolution here. You say you are going to talk to South Africa. And if South Africa does not implement this watered down resolution of yours, then next year we'll come back with that original resolution you watered down and would want you to implement it. And the original resolution was calling for mandatory economic sanctions, which meant that the Security Council would have to boycott South Africa.
My granddad's youngest son, Paulo, lives in America. He enlisted with the American military and was part of the troops that went to Iraq as a part of America's war against terror.
He joined the military, and I know someone, if it was a general or someone, who tried to get Dad to come to a ceremony before they were going to Iraq, and my father refused because of his political ideals and so on. You know, he was against the war. That's my father. He has very strong political beliefs, and he don't compromise with them. Even if he wanted to see Paulo, no, he couldn't do that because of his political beliefs.
I came to understand that it would have been tough for my granddad to see Paulo, whom he hadn't seen in so long.
I would have liked Paulo to come and visit his father sometimes, but I don't know how it happened.
My parents were married in 1982. This was one of the most significant moments in my dad's life.
I was wondering what my dad would say, but eventually then he said, obviously, if my mom is in agreement, then it must be the right thing to do. But it would have been great to have had him around physically.
Would you say maybe that was the time that you needed him most?
I think that was the time I needed him most, and that was the time when he wasn't really there. Yeah. I would have loved to have talked to him to say, Dad, what do you think about this? What should I do? What should happen? I think it would have been great, yeah. And just to hear him ask the key questions, you know, do you love her? Do you want to make that kind of love commitment? Yes, Dad. Okay, son. Give me an embrace. Oh, that would have been great. But none of that, unfortunately. Sad. Yeah. Sometimes I was envious of my friends whose fathers were around. There were some who had their fathers who were around. I remember the late Jerry, a friend of mine, was a very close friend of mine, who was shot during the 1976 riots. I would see them taking a walk, you know. We had our house had a window that was facing the street. And I remember as a young child sitting there in a window sometimes on the bed and seeing them take a walk to the shops, you know, and wondering what it would have been like to have had my dad with me, you know. What would he say? what would we do together?
I think he has a little problems with understanding this hard situation also, because he also grew up without a father, my dad. He told me that he started school, and that's when he realized that other boys and girls had fathers, and he didn't know that. He didn't know that was something strange, not to have a father.
My dad is an absent father because he didn't have a father. And to find out that Count also didn't have a father made me realize that I'm part of a continuous cycle in my family. Children growing up without a father.
It's a cycle, yeah. Repetitive behavior. What happened to the father also happens in his relationship to his children, and the children also feel deprived. Yeah, but the father also felt deprived.
Not guilty, Your Worship.
It says here you did not produce a pass on demand.
Awoliki panga ipasi lako.
Bendinga ikude nkosi ipasi lam lisekhaya nkosi bendiwela nje isitilato nkosi ngalelanda ipasi lam nkosi.
He says he left it at home, Your Worship. He'd only gone out for a moment to buy something.
You tried to run away from the policeman.
Ububalekilani uma ubona ipoyisa.
Bendifuna ukuyokulanda ipasi lam ekhaya nkosi.
He said he only wanted to go home for his pass, Your Worship.
That's no use. You know you've got to have your pass with you always. And you're wasting the time of the court. £5 or 1 month.
Oponda abahlanu noma inyanga.
As I see it, if it wasn't for apartheid, my parents wouldn't have been separated in the first instance. I think my dad wouldn't have to run away from the country and find himself in a foreign land with me not being there and so on. So a lot of times I was blaming apartheid for, my life and how it turned out.
As far as my dad saw it, apartheid stole his father from him. Ending apartheid was my grandfather's life passion.
We started it at the United Nations, and the PAC and the ANC and the frontline states took it up, and they presented it. They drew up a draft which was submitted or presented to a United Nations conference. And when the United Nations had received that and adopted this declaration, there was no alternative for de Klerk but to call for the release of political prisoners, the return of exile.
We met my grandfather for the first time in 1994 after the first democratic elections.
When I got the first telephone call from had in South Africa. It was fantastic. Sorry. Sorry. Because then I felt, okay, now I have, then I could really feel that, okay, now I have this other country to relate to, and so on. We didn't see each other very much because, he was traveling around and working at different places in the world and so on. But he always phoned and always sent postcards and so on. And I knew there were things happening in South Africa with Mandela's release and so on. So I knew that maybe soon he will be traveling to South Africa. And when I got this phone call, I think he phoned me on the airport even, when he just came to Joburg, I think. And that was the first time I started to, feel that I have this second country, and someday I can go there also.
When we understand our history, we do not have to continue this pattern that is destructive or self-destructive. We can solve the problems in a more constructive way, a more happy way for ourselves and our family.
We have made gain, but not enough. But what we have gained is dignity. You see, people can have as much money as you like, they can build in, and as people are doing, they can live in castles, palaces. But if you haven't got dignity, then you're not a complete human being. Then you're still a lesser human being. Because under apartheid you had these laws, non-Europeans not allowed. There were even boards that said non-Europeans and dogs not allowed. So in the apartheid, they even reduced people who are not white to the level of animals. What has happened in '94 is people want their dignity. You can now walk tall as a proud South African with no fear that you will be looked down upon legally. Because apartheid, is a crime. Racism is a crime today. So today you can walk tall as a human being, equal, and you can assert your dignity anywhere in South Africa. That is what we have achieved in '94. Never forget that.
If I would have been more certain of myself, if I had a relationship with my dad, I don't know if I would have, I wish I would have been more confident with my own choices in life if I had a relationship with my dad. I wonder if I would have been more confident. I feel frustrated that I couldn't make it work. I think I wanted to make that relationship work naturally because I'm his son, and I think it came natural to me that I wanted to please my father and I wanted to be like him. And the fact that I felt this rejection from my father, that frustrated me. I never felt that confidence, but and I think a lot of it is because I didn't really feel acceptance from you. And I think I've always felt from my mother, and she's always been there, and it's fine. And I even told her the same thing, that You know, I wish I had a relationship with my dad. I really wish I did.
We had to come to the concrete realization that bringing you guys up, it does take, resources which we didn't have. I mean, both of us were at varsity when you guys were born. I mean, there were times when I felt a little bit jealousy, perhaps, especially in your case. You were Mama was very close to you. So I felt that you had taken a bit of what was mine away, you know. And I think at times it would come, you know, and I don't know what it was. Yeah, it was just that because she was particularly fond of you. We tried our best. We depended a lot on the church, on our own upbringing. One of my regrets is that, you know, I never really walked you guys to school, you know. I know there was a time when I saw you in your uniform several times on a Friday when I came back. But I would have loved to have been there in the mornings when you were struggling to go to school or dress you up even and that. So that's really a big part that for me is missing.
I've always known that life was difficult. Now I understand that it's also complex. I love the men in my family. They're selfless and they've put the people first. They made their life choices and made the best they could with what life dealt them.
Okay, Dad, we are dashing out. We are late for a Methodist bride, church bride. Oh, yeah, they started at about 3 o'clock. Okay. We are only going now. Okay. And we're still going to buy some meat and stuff. True so African. We'll see you when we come back. Yeah, we're on African time.
There is not much I can do about the past. Only the present is mine, and I have the power and the will to influence this space and time.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. How old are you?
At the end of my journey, I'm glad that I got to meet my grandfather. I am happier still for the newfound relationship with my father. With the freedom I have, I want to end the legacy and heritage of displacement and absenteeism, which has affected me, my father, my father's father, and his father's father.